But we will have a time to turn on the cameras after the presentation when it's time for the audience question and answer. But I'm so glad to see so many familiar names here that I feel like I've seen maybe in my neighborhood, maybe when I've been traveling around the country. So it's really great to see everyone here today. And one of my goals with these Zoom conversations, well, first of all, was to break up the doldrums of being at home, which a lot of us are. But secondly, I wanted to share a little bit about what my process is like writing these books. That when I write about Parsi customs or I write about Parsi food, it doesn't come out of thin air. And also, I am just not an encyclopedia of facts. And I also don't trust everything I read. I like to talk to real people, people on the ground. And when I was researching the first book in my series, The Widows of Malabar Hill, I discovered an incredible blog about Parsi cooking and cuisine and the history of Parsi food called Bavi Bride. That's BAWIBRIDE.com. And Perzen Patel, who's on the screen, is the creator of that blog. So we'll be talking to her today. Before I really get into it with Perzen, I wanted to let everybody know that I'm doing a giveaway. This is a surprise. I'm doing a giveaway of 2 advanced reading copies of the Bombay Prince. I just got these about a week ago in the mail. And usually what I do is I just send them to people in the press or something like that. But you're special to me, and I know it's a wait till the book comes out. So the book comes out June 1st. So during this conversation, you'll have a chance to win a personalized signed copy of the ARC mailed to you. And the way to do it is to send a message to Stephen Tran, who you see on the screen. And Stephen, do you want to tell a little bit more about how people can submit their entry for the giveaway?
Sure. So you can see under my name here the email address to send it to, but also I put it in the chat. So if you'd like to enter to win an advanced reader copy of the new book, then just send me an email and we will announce a winner at one or two winners at the end of the call. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. So it's just, going into the chat and sending it to Stephen. So where to begin? First of all, the thing I've got to say, Perzen, hello.
Hi, Sujata. It's lovely to be here.
What time is it? Tell everyone what time it is.
It's 6:04 in the morning in New Zealand. But no, we've known each other for so long. So I really wanted to come and do this with you and talk about my favorite topic, which is Parsi food.
You are so generous to be doing it this early in the morning. And the reason that I set on doing my event, right now it's 1 o'clock in Eastern Standard Time, is I knew that people in Europe would be just getting ready for dinner. People in California would be up. People in India would be just finishing dinner because people eat late, right?
Really late.
Like when you're in India, when you're living with your in-laws, what time typically was dinner?
Oh gosh, I remember when I moved back, typically at their house, dinner was around 9, which would be a really early one, or like maybe 9:30, 9:45 is when people sit down to have dinner. Yeah, and I'd just come from New Zealand where we have dinner at like 6:37. So whenever we had guests over, I'd just be starving. I'd be the only one who was like really hungry, like watching the clock. Can we just sit and eat now?
Yeah, we would have to beg our family, our relatives, could you please serve dinner at 8? Could we compromise on 9? Because it was usually 10 o'clock and we would be so tired, from traveling. So I really appreciate it. I heard you had some coffee. I'm glad you had some coffee. And I hope that some of the folks on the call maybe have some leftover Indian food in their fridge, or they're thinking about going out for an Indian lunch or dinner, and maybe you will be after this conversation. The other thing I wanted to say is it's like the springtime, New Year time. It's Passover is starting here in a few hours in the United States. It's going to be Easter 2 Sundays from now. And your New Year, the Persian New Year started, was it last weekend?
Yeah, it was last weekend. So it was on the 20th of March. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us all a little bit about this new year and how you celebrate it, and maybe I think you might have a picture of your New Year's table.
Sure, sure. So, well, to begin with, Parsis celebrate 2 New Years. And so I always used to tell people that I was really lucky because if you add up the calendar year, we get to celebrate a new year practically every 4 months. So, it's really great with those resolutions. You can just keep making them, keep breaking them. No one needs to know. But the one that's really special is Nowruz. And throughout, I feel the kind of Persian subcontinent, a lot of people outside of, even if you don't follow Zoroastrianism, you'd still be aware of Nowruz, or Nowruz is how they kind of say it. And the reason it's celebrated is it's a celebration of spring. It's the changing of the seasons. We want to kind of, I guess, give our thanks. It's kind of very similar to the Thanksgiving holiday that is celebrated in other cultures. So it's a similar concept of giving thanks, but this is more thanking nature, welcoming people into your home, and just kind of celebrating together. So I'm going to share my screen. One of the things we do is do a Huff the Scene table. It's also called a Nowruz table. Just gonna make this. So I hope you guys can see this.
Looks really nice close up.
Yeah. So it's basically a lot of different people will do it differently, but the key element is that there's normally seven things at least that you put on the table, which begin with the letter S. I don't know why it needs to be the letter S, but it does. And we also follow the Lunar New Year. So which is an interesting thing. So whatever the animal, which is there for Chinese New Year, we will often place that same animal. So this year was Year of the Ox. Or the bull. And so you don't actually see it on my table because my kids have taken away my little farm animal and they were running around with it. So you can't see it in the photo, but it was there. So you put that, and that changes every year depending on what the animal is for the Chinese New Year, which I find really interesting about like kind of where that history intersects of why we put that. So as you can see here, there is sabze, which is the wheat grass that you grow. And this is the most important kind of planning element. You need to pop in your wheat seeds into the pot about a couple of weeks before Nowruz, so that, you've got this beautiful wheat grass growing just in time for Nowruz. And then we've got sumanu. So sumanu is like a sweet pudding, and that's made of wheat. Now, I don't know if you mentioned this in your book, Sujata, but Parsis also call it malido. So, and then Boris, they follow Muslim faith, but speak Gujarati, and they are another community that live in Mumbai. They call it malida. So there's a lot of kind of Persian and then a lot of Indian cultures that have this similar dish, which is essentially made with wheat and sugar and dry fruits. Really good for you, and lots of ghee. So that's the samanu. And then there is senjed, which is the sweet dry fruits. So that can be anything. You can put some dates and raisins, whatever you'd like. And then we've got a sirke, which is the vinegar. So that's my balsamic vinegar. We've got sebe, which is the apple. And then we've got seer, which is a garlic. You can't see my little garlic pod here. It's hidden in my vegetable thing. And then you can also have sumac, or you can have anything with the color red. And that's my little pot over here. So each of these things actually signifies different parts of the elements. So, you know, we also have to have eggs, and so the eggs are for fertility. No one in my house eats eggs, so that's why these are like the glittery styrofoam ones, because I don't want to just make force feed eggs to people. But so it will be different for different houses, you know. And the main tradition is that, as you can see, there's a mirror here. So what we do is when people come in, we hold up the mirror to them, and they look at themselves in the mirror, and we ask that they smile in the mirror. And the idea of that is kind of basically to say that may you always look at your reflection, look at your past, but smile at it, and know that kind of you've learned from your past, and like you kind of, and then you smile into the mirror. So it's kind of like, I guess a little bit of the positive thinking kind of approach, where you kind of, you know, if you're smiling, you're welcoming that positive energy into you and into your next year. And then you'll see this little, so this is a Parsi ses, which is an important element in all Parsi, I guess in all Parsi celebrations. So we'll always put it out for birthdays, or now Joe, we have a very bigger version of this for a wedding. But so this is basically, it's got a little few holes in the top, and that gets some water out. So we put rose water in it. And so while people are looking in the mirror, we sprinkle a little bit of rose water. So kind of to signify, may you always smell as sweet as a rose, and may your life be a bed of roses. So that's the rose water coupled with the mirror. And then each of the things kind of stands for different elements. So for example, the wheat grass is for, you know, like, may we always have enough to eat. And there's rice, which is always meant to be around signifying prosperity in many cultures. So different people will do it differently. Some will also have a fish. So I had a tiny silver fish. I don't actually put a goldfish in, but yeah. And the whole custom is that people just come over, we do this, and then our family would go over to someone else's house, and we'd do the Nowruz table over there. So it was great. And this year it was really special, because last year we did Nowruz. It was the first one in my new home here in New Zealand. And then the day after that, we went into lockdown. And so, you know, at that time, people were very wary. We hardly had anyone come over. And then this year it was amazing, because I mean, I'm really lucky that we're in New Zealand, where we're kind of living a little bit in alternate reality. But we had lots and lots of people come over to our house this year, and it was a special one to kind of celebrate with people, you know, and kind of, especially after this year of lockdowns and not being able to visit people, this was an extra special one. So yeah, that's a little bit about it, but we can chat more if anyone has any specific questions around the rose.
I'm thinking about right now in the United States, about 25% of the population has been vaccinated. So it's like, I think that people have those similar feelings of it being like a new year and a new era. So I wanted to, this was reminding me so much in the Widows of Malabar Hill. I have Perveen returning from her mishaps in Calcutta on Nowruz. That's when she arrives, and she almost didn't realize it. And her whole family, they come to the train station and they're all dressed for the holiday, but of course they can't really have it. And there are these fireworks going off. And I remember that her mother makes her this cup of tea, and she starts to tell the story. And I remember when I visited you at your house, and multiple times I've had this wonderful Parsi chai.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, because we're not doing any cooking demos, can you tell people how to make this tea if they want to try it themselves?
Sure. So the most important part of making this tea is that you do have to make it on the stove, and it does need to kind of boil and cook as compared to making it on a tea bag. So that's the key element, because what we do put in the tea is essentially mint and lemongrass, and then the tea. So that would be just a very kind of basic one. And then if you did have some guests coming over, or you wanted to make it extra special, you could also put in some green cardamom, just to give it a little bit of that aroma. And then you pour it into your finest cup, and then you add in milk. So the key difference between Indian chai is that Indian chai, the milk will be cooked in the tea. So when it's on the stove, people will add in the milk into the tea, and then they'll allow it to kind of just overcook and just boil and bubble away. So you get a very milky tea. And often it's very, very sweet, because they also put in the sugar at the same time. Now, the difference between that and the Parsi tea is we fancy ourselves to be a little bit British. So it's a hangover from colonial times. So what we do is we don't add the milk in the tea. So you will still cook the tea with all the spices and the mint and lemongrass, but then you would basically how we do it now. So you pour the tea into the cup and then add milk at the top. So you get like a very nice black tea, which has been brewed, and it doesn't taste too milky like an Indian chai would. So that's the key difference between a Parsi tea and an Indian chai.
Yeah, I do that technique because I don't drink milk, like cow's milk anymore. So I just
Yeah.
add in a little bit of oat milk or something like that at the very end. But I've
Yeah.
been fortunate I'm now able to get lemongrass at some farmers markets, like lemongrass
Yeah.
with actual green stems, the fresh grassy part. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's really a treat. And
Yeah.
my ears perked up when you said that nobody in your house eats eggs, because I was under the impression that eggs are the number one Parsi food. So tell me if I'm wrong. Tell us
No,
about.
you are absolutely not wrong. So it's just so when I had my Parsi catering company, I had to keep the secret very well hidden, because no one trusts a Parsi who doesn't eat eggs. Um, basically, eggs. I don't know. A lot of Parsis just love eating eggs, and we actually have a whole bunch of dishes that we cook with the eggs. Now, the reason in my house, when I say my husband likes to eat them, and I still enjoy a good akuri, but I don't like eating boiled eggs or scrambled eggs, so you need to put boiled eggs on the Navroz table. So that was that part. But to tell you a little bit about the eggs, I don't know where that kind of Parsi fascination with it comes, but if we kind of think back, we had really big families then, and eggs was a good way of kind of getting your protein and getting your staples in, and feeding the bigger family without it getting really costly and really expensive. Now, Parsis do a whole bunch of dishes. So one of the key ones is an akuri. So an akuri is a version of the Indian bhurji. So you will get an Indian bhurji anywhere, and that is basically some spices, onion, tomato, and then you cook the egg in, and you just basically stir the egg in and mix it in. So that's the recipe that's there on my blog as well. So that's a bhurji. Now, how does an akuri stand out? So an akuri is always made with ghee and not with oil, and it's looser in texture, which basically means that you're switching off your stove just when the egg is scrambling, and so not kind of, once the egg is fully cooked and it's kind of become an omelette-y texture. So that's why you get the akuri to be much more creamier than a bhurji would be. A bhurji will be much drier. But the other thing that Parsis are really known for is the parida. So we basically will break eggs on top of anything. So we have papeta parida, which is eggs on potato. Then you have I'm just kind of trying to think. There's sali parida, which is finer potatoes. They're like potato straws, and that one is the fine potato straws as compared to papeta paida, which is flat discs of potato. And then you would also have some people will do like a roast burrito. So that's your Sunday roast, whatever you've got left over, like the leftover meat. You just put that and then break a couple of eggs on top and allow it to cook. And then you've got the roast burrito. So basically you can put eggs on top of anything. And that's a real Parsi fascination. We love doing that with all our meals. So that's kind of the emergency meal in any house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great tip for anyone. Like, so the way that I would make that, the eggs on top of something is I start by sauteing onion and fresh ginger, and then I put a chopped vegetable in and a little bit of turmeric and salt and pepper and maybe red chili. And then when it looks like it's sort of coming along nicely, I break an egg on top of it. I turn the heat down and I put a lid on. And so I'm poaching the egg, and it's just the most incredible breakfast or lunch or dinner.
Exactly,
So,
it works for any meal,
yeah.
and Parsis will make this in two different styles. So just like you said, but some Parsis will break the whole egg like you did, and some will, before they put the egg on top, they will have beaten the egg. So then you get that beautiful kind of like omelette type of thing happening as compared to the whole egg being on it. So yeah,
We
but
had a
but it's
question.
beautiful to make it.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I
No,
just
no,
noticed there were a couple of food-related questions in the chat, and one of them what is the spelling for the pudding that you mentioned that was on the New Year's table?
Sure, it's Malido, so that's Malido, and that's a recipe that's there on my Barbie Bride blog. Yeah, but it's also called Malida, which is Maleeda. Yeah, so that's
The
I
other,
called it. I called it Sumanu, but the Malido is the one that you'll find the recipe for, because Sumanu is just a kind of way of referring to that dish.
okay, here's a question about tea. Do you steep the herbs and spices for a long time before the tea? How long for the steeping of all or each?
I don't think you need to steep it for longer because, so I would say what we do is you allow the water to kind of come to, when you're boiling water on the stove, you start getting the bubbles. So that's just before you get the rolling boil. And so that's when I would add in my tea, like either the tea bags or like the tea leaves or tea powder, and the mint and lemongrass at that time. And then you need to allow it to come to a rolling boil and be at a rolling boil for about 2 or 3 minutes. And the heat kind of does the magic for you. So you don't need to steep it for kind of very long as such. Yeah.
So how did you learn to cook like this? And like, tell us about your cooking journey and whether it was started in New Zealand or started in India.
So my cooking journey is strange, and I find always kind of like having to check myself in a way, because so food has always been a part of my life. My grandmom and my parents have always taught me, I think, and it's your Parsi heritage, it's always taught me to like enjoy a good plate of food. But I didn't really know how to cook any Parsi food. I was a very spoiled daughter, so my mom used to cook everything for me. And I even though while I was a hospitality student, I always thought it was I was very drawn to cooking food from other cultures, not really wanting to cook my own food because I found it very hard, mainly because Indian mums don't really give you a proper recipe. They'll just kind of they'll give you a list of ingredients where they'll be like, oh, do this, add this, and no one tells you what quantities. So it just always felt really intimidating to try it. Now, what happened is in 2011, I moved back from New Zealand to India. And then I got married to my husband in 2012. And I was, like Praveen, living in a joint family. And I found it really intimidating because food is such an important part of a Parsi person's life. And so no one told me that I had to cook, but it kind of felt like I needed to learn how to cook because it was really important. So I kind of set out on this journey to, learn Parsi food. And what would happen is that I'd call my mum at all odd hours of the day, and then she'd give me this list of ingredients. I'd write it down on a piece of paper, or she'd sometimes give me some quantities. And then I would lose the pieces of paper. So I was like, oh, I need some way of like being able to refer to it. And so that's how I started the blog. And it's called Bawi Bride because Bawi is a colloquial term for a Parsi. So Parsis are referred to as Bawas for the male Parsi and Bawi for the female Parsi. And so bride because I started the blog and my food journey just when I got married. So that was the name, Bawi Bride. And originally the blog just kind of started as a joke and more of like a place where I could go back and refer to the recipe, because I was like, if it's on a website, if there's a link, I can Google it and it'll always be available for me. So that was kind of the reason why I started it. And then it just kind of snowballed and I started getting a lot of people, a lot of actually people who had married into the Parsi community. So a similar thing to me, were either living overseas, etc. Because when I started this blog, there wasn't any real website which was documenting Parsi food. So that was kind of how the food journey started, and it just kind of evolved and grew into this thing. It wasn't ever something I kind of set out to do. So I find it very serendipitous to, be sitting here and talking to you about Parsi food and Parsi history when it's not something that kind of I set out as a career path. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important what you're doing, that you're keeping the food alive and you're also spreading it to more people. Do you think that Parsi restaurants could succeed outside of India? And if so, like where are some of these restaurants?
So there are a few, I don't know about if Parsi restaurants as a standalone could survive. And it's nothing to do with the food, but rather to do with the awareness people have around Indian food. So Parsi food is a very tiny subsect of Indian food. When I moved back to New Zealand, I found if I need to explain Parsi food to someone, I need to kind of go like, 10,000 years ago, there was Zoroastrianism, and this was Pars, and this is how it became Parsis. And, this is because Parsi food is unique in the sense that it's an amalgamation of all our cultures. In that sense, it's really modern. Like if you think about the food we all eat today, we kind of pick and choose. We take the best of, we like this thing from this person. Okay, we're going to take that. So I don't know, like at least that's how I cook. I like the pasta sauce from the Italians, so I'm going to take that. I like this from the Mexicans, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to make something else. And that's a lot of how Parsi food was in those days. The three main kind of influences to Parsi food are the British influence. So you'll find things like we make a custard, which is very, very similar to the British custard. Even if the tea we talked about, that is, adding milk to the tea later is a very British custom that we followed. And it wasn't really an Indian custom. And that comes from the Parsis working very closely with the British, because we were one of the first educated communities in India. So that's the British influence. There is the Goan Portuguese influence, which comes because we had the Goan cooks at our home. So when Parsis cook a vindaloo, that is actually a Goan vindaloo. Like that is the Goan cook cooking it for you, but now it's a Parsi dish. And then we have the Persian influence, obviously, which comes in from our time in Iran and stuff. And so that's why there's a lot of food which is very meat heavy and very dry fruit heavy, because that is the way a lot of use of saffron. So that's all the Persian roots coming in. So if you kind of think about it, it's really amazing. Like, it's this really old cuisine, but it's really the modern way that we cook food. We kind of take whatever we want from different cultures. Now, to answer your question around would a Parsi restaurant survive? What I set out to do with my blog eventually is to kind of modernize, not modernize, but kind of get people to know the other dishes, because I find that people just know a few dishes. Like, they know about dhansak, and they know about patrani machi, which are like the kind of key dishes that have a lot of people talk about. Media kind of touches on them, but no one talks about the everyday dishes like papeta paridu or akuri. And those are the kind of ones that I wanted people to know. So that's the kind of stuff I cover on my blog, which is the everyday food that we eat. There is, I believe, Dishoom in UK. They do a few Parsi dishes. You'll find a couple of Parsi, you'll find a Parsi caterer anywhere you'll find Parsi food, but you'll really need to hunt for them, because they don't really serve to like an international audience. They would mostly be kind of serving the community that lives around. I know there was a Parsi chef in New York, but the name escapes me right now. So they are there, but they would again be only kind of doing the dhansak and some of those ones. Yeah. Sorry, I went on a bit of a detour there, Sujata.
I made a Parsi palau once, like and it took so long. It had the barberries in it, which are really nice. Barberries are similar to cranberries, but more delicious in my opinion, and smaller.
They're more sour, so they're different from a cranberry, because your barberry's got that hint of like a sour tang to it, which your cranberry doesn't.
Yeah.
And that, Sujata, is actually a perfect example of the Parsi influence, because if you ask any Persian Iranian, they will have a dish called zireshk pulo in their culture. So the zireshk is the berry, but the way the Iranians cook it is just the rice and saffron and the zireshk berries, while the way Indian Parsis cook it is got a lot of that spice and masala of the biryani, and then we also add in the zireshk berries.
Yeah. So I want to get back to that relationship of like women cooking for their in-laws and things like that. And in my novels, like right now, we're when you get into the Bombay Prince, Perveen is back in the city. And so her sister-in-law lives on the other side of the duplex, and she can cook. Perveen still can't cook. But they have a cook, like they have a male cook. And I had heard that there were a lot of cooks from Goa that were cooking in Mumbai, because I think that they were coveted for whatever skills with baking and desserts especially. And I wanted to ask if there are a number, when you lived in India, if you did know Parsi households where they did have cooks working there, and whether they were cooks of other faiths who learned to do the Parsi cooking.
So yes, there was a lot of, historically, yes, there was a lot of Goan cooks in the kind of big Parsi families, because Parsis also followed the kind of culture of all the families living together. And so often you'd have, like Perveen does, like her sister-in-law and their family and everyone staying. And you'll see this in some Parsi colonies still, where now they might be in separate flats, but the whole building might belong to a family, and they've just kind of separated it out. So people still have their privacy, but all the family stays in the one building. I'm not sure where the kind of, so a lot of richer families in India do have cooks and domestic help. And Parsis used to always just have like a live-in help. And so that was often Goan. I'm not entirely sure why they were Goan. But again, it could be to do with the work around, if you think a lot of the early Parsis used to be shipping merchants. And so there was a lot of like the British and Portuguese that they used to liaise with. And that's where they lived very closely around that hub of like Bombay, Goa, So that's probably kind of where the culture comes in, to have a Goan cook. Goans are also known to cook really good food. And so like I was telling you, we've actually taken a few of their dishes and also their penchant of adding vinegar. So a lot of Parsi food is sweet and sour at the same time, like a sali boti. And we do the balancing act of sweet and sour all the time. And that comes from, I guess, the Goan penchant of adding vinegar to all your food. That's all I could really tell you. That's always my goal. It's always my goal. At the end of a conversation, people should be hungry, and then I think mission achieved.
Yeah, so I would love to open this up to people and their questions. Our listeners have been so patient during this time. And so also, if you feel like putting your camera on now, I think that Stephen is going to do something. Also, I just want to remind people this is the last call for entering the drawing for the 2 copies of the Bombay Prince. So you could quickly send a chat message to Stephen and tell him your name and your email if you're interested. So now we've got people that want to ask questions. In the reactions, there's a raise hand button. Does anybody want to do that? Raise a hand, and then I'll call on you and you ask your question for Perzen or for me. Are you able? Hopefully that is enabled. I hope I've enabled everyone to be able to do that, to raise a hand. I'm not seeing any raised hand. Well, if you want to physically raise your hand, if I can't see that, and if you have a question, because I'm just not seeing any raised hands. Do we have any questions? I can always ask another question. So maybe people are.
Can I ask one without writing it down?
Sure, go. Yeah, that's what I mean. You can ask a question verbally.
I just went on the blog for the Melida, and there's 3 different flowers. A wheat flower, semolina, and maida, M-A-I-D-A. Does that correspond to anything we can get here in the States?
Of course. So Paula, you will get semolina in any Indian shop. The wheat flour you should get in a normal grocery shop, and maida is maida is essentially just your normal baking flour. So just your standard flour is called maida in India. So a kind of thing that I need to do is make this blog a little more readable by international audiences. It has a lot of like kind of just Indian ingredients in it. And I need to kind of go in and do that part and update those recipes, but it's essentially standard baking flour. So you should be able to use that. And semolina as well, I believe you now get it in all grocery shops.
Okay,
so when you say wheat flour, do you mean whole wheat flour?
Yeah. Whole wheat flour.
That's what we.
So it's got whole wheat flour, it's got semolina, and it's got the standard white flour.
Well,
and that's essential.
Yeah. Cake pastry wheat flour, so it gets really confusing after a while. Because I had to buy that once, and it was cake pastry flour or something. I go look it up.
You can go look it up, but it's essentially any white flour will do the job. This is not a dish which requires the flour to rise or anything like it. So honestly speaking, any white flour you get should do the trick.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Another question?
I'm just really hungry. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. That's really amazing that you are hungry. I think that's like I was telling Sujata, that's my kind of goal to finish every conversation with people being hungry. So yeah. I also wanted to, Sujata, I put it in the chat, but to tell people that before I forgot to tell you this actually, but before I moved back to New Zealand, I did a very limited edition podcast of 14 episodes. And that podcast is called Not Just Hansak. And that's a great starting point if you want to find out more about Parsi food and Parsi food history. And it's actually got a couple of American Parsi entrepreneurs who are doing some interesting things with Parsi food. So what I did with that one is just spoke to a few of the kind of iconic Parsi people to discover different elements about, so we've spoken about writing about Parsi food, we've spoken about, you know, like Facebook communities that exist around Parsi food. And so it was I guess for me, a ode of a wrapping up of all the Parsi food work I did in India. It was a way of kind of me finishing up that piece of work before I moved to New Zealand. So it's only 14 episodes, and I've popped the link in there in the chat in case anyone's interested. Because my key goal was to tell people that, you know, Parsi food is more than dhansak. So that's what we've tried to do with that podcast.
Okay, so Sonia has a question.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Sujata, for doing this call at a time when I can, from Europe, be able to join this, because it's about 6:30 or 22:07 now here in Hamburg. So thanks a lot for that. And I've got a question that is related to Indian food, and also there was a scene in the book, I think, remember, where Perzen was thinking about whether she should eat with a hand or with a cutlery. And since I haven't been to India, unfortunately, I don't know what is the technique actually to eat with your right hand, because if the food is very saucy, or if you've got rice, how do you do that? Because I've never seen this. So is there a way, is a special technique for eating?
Sure, I can tell you, Sonia. So, and that's a really good question, and that actually also allows me to put in a little bit of, and tell you a little bit of history around the Parsi weddings and how they're different. So the way to tell you, the way you eat with your hand is you kind of use your 4 fingers. And so often what we'll do is the curry will be on top of the rice. So whatever kind of sauce you're having, it will either be on top of the rice, or the sauce will be served in a special, like a separate small bowl, and you would dip your bread or your roti into it, and that kind of absorbs a little bit of the sauce. So that's how you'd eat it if you were just having sauce. But rice is a staple food for all Indian communities. And what you do is you kind of gather it with your 4 fingers, and then you push it onto your finger with your thumb, and then you eat it. So that's basically the technique. There's no real technique. It's a great way of eating, because you'll never end up eating food that's really hot for your mouth, because if your fingers can't handle it, then it's too hot for your mouth. So that was kind of the bit around that. And it's also, I guess, because you eat with your fingers, then you're really hygienic, and you'll wash your hands, and you'll do that part before eating your food. But yeah, so a lot of cultures do it. Now, what I wanted to kind of share is, so like I was indicating earlier in the call, a lot of Parsis, because we work so closely with the British, and that was from the shipping routes and things like that, we kind of consider ourselves to be half British. No one's told us that, but we've just kind of adopted it, and we've said we are gonna kind of go with it. So almost a third of our cuisine, the use of white sauce in our dishes, for example, that's a British hang-up. The making of the custard. So we do a lot of our desserts. You know, we have a chapat, which is essentially a very thin crepe, which I'm sure the British took from the French. So there's a lot of that British influence. And so the way Parsi weddings are really different is we still follow, if you go to a Parsi wedding, the first thing is that the menu never changes. So any Parsi wedding you go, there's pretty much the same kind of dishes, same 10 dishes, and it will either be this kind of fish or that kind of fish, this palau or that palau. But that's basically the only change that happens. Now, if you were to be invited to a Parsi wedding, which is one of the few ways that you can actually try Parsi food, aside from if you knew a Parsi, there would be long tables, and that would be covered with a tablecloth, and there would be banyan banana leaves. Now, this banana leaves concept you see in other communities of India. So this is something that we've picked up from living in India. Kerala weddings do that. A lot of the weddings in South India serve food on a banana leaf. And that was essentially meant to be the original eco-friendly part before eco-friendly became a thing. You know, you serve it on a banana leaf, you wrap it up, throw it away, it composts itself. You don't need to worry about cutlery. And so Kerala and South Indian weddings still serve it on the banana leaf. But you eat with your hand. Now, because of our British hang up, what we do is we still do on a banana leaf, but our banana leaves are not put on, like it's not, you don't have to crouch down and eat on towards the ground. We have a proper table and chair. The banana leaves are on a tablecloth. There is a glass with cutlery. So it's very like kind of we're stuck in between these two worlds, because we're like, oh, we want to be fancy and British and we'll eat with cutlery. So you'll have like your fork and spoon, but hey, we're also Indian, so we'll like eat on a banana leaf, and that's always been something which has really struck me, and I always kind of have a little bit of a giggle when I go to a Parsi wedding. So that's a little bit of history there for you.
I see Tara's hand up. Tara, I'm pronouncing your name the Indian way. I hope that's okay. How do you pronounce your name?
Either way is okay, Sujata. We met in New York, remember?
I remember. Yeah, I remember that.
Up to Turkey, yes.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for arranging the call. And Perzen, I loved your presentation. I'm also hungry after your presentation. You mission accomplished. You mentioned that you learned cooking as an adult after you got married. And I heard you mention that you have children. I don't know how old they are, but do you plan on teaching them how to cook as when they can navigate in the kitchen? And if so, will you give them ingredient amounts or just a little bit of this and a little bit of that?
So I love this. So to answer your question, yes, I have two boys. They're almost 3 and almost 5. And which is why I was really grateful. This call is happening at 6 in the morning before they wake up. They might just pop in at any time now. So basically what's happened is, it's interesting because I've noticed life's coming back to full circle, because now when I cook Indian food, I find myself catching myself like my mom to kind of go like, just put in this and just put in that. And I think that comes with a lot of Indian food's very intuitive. You know, you need to trust your flavor, you need to trust your sense of smell. And a lot of Indians will tell you that you need to cook with all your smell, like all your senses. If you go to, so I've cooked in like a Marriott kitchen where the head chef, he never ate meat, but he cooked all the meat dishes for all of, for all services. He was in charge, and he used to tell me that he could just smell the food, like he could smell the aroma, and he could tell you whether there was less salt or less chili powder, and he could tell you. So a lot of Indian food is around the balance of the spices and around trusting your instinct, and so not really cooking with a recipe. So that's where I kind of struggled with it at the start. So that's really hard for a new cook. And so if you go right back to my blog archives and kind of see some of the older recipes, you'll see that I've actually done step-by-step photos as well for some of them. So for like the dhan sak, I've done that, because when you cook a dhan sak, it looks nothing like what the end dish needs to look like when you're cooking. So you would be so scared if you were just like new to making it. And you're like, oh, what is this brown gloop? Like, is this like, am I doing this right? Should I just like throw it off? But it comes together when it cooks. And so you need to trust yourself and like trust the process kind of thing. In saying that, I feel it's really important to share those recipes, because that's the only way you can break that barrier and get people to cook kind of, I'd say our community is very small and our cuisine's on the verge of kind of being lost. So it is my dream one day to have a cookbook, which is more of a book around, it's not just a cookbook, it's more around stories, like the Parsi food stories, like the ones that I told you around why do we, go to a Parsi, like why will you have food with a fork and spoon at a Parsi wedding, but still be having it off a banana leaf. So it's about sharing those stories, because I feel that when you share a story around it, that food becomes special. You want to make them a leader because I've told you it's at a no roast table. If I just told you, oh, it's a wheat pudding, blah, 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 who cares? There's like 1,000 recipes of that, but you want to make it because it's at no roast tables and it's a custom. And so I want to do that. And so, yes, I do involve my boys. I try to, they're still a little too young, but I think especially I try to include them because a lot of Indian parents treat boys as royalty and they never learn how to cook and fend for themselves. So for me, it's kind of, I see it as a responsibility to to the future woman to make sure I put 2 boys out into the world who can fend for themselves and are not completely reliant on their wife to take care of them. So definitely going to be teaching them. And in fact, so the Nowruz table as well, a lot of Parsis. So again, a little bit of history lesson. So Parsis, we all follow the faith Zoroastrianism, and we're called the Parsis because we came from the Pars region of Persia. But there was 2 waves of migration. There was the really early wave of migration, which was the Parsis, and that was around 8 or 9 BC. And then there was one which was later, which was more around the 14th, 15th century. And so those people are called Iranis. But we both follow the Zoroastrian faith. Now, because the Iranis came to India much, much later, they still retain a lot of their Irani culture. So I'm Parsi, but my mom is an Irani side. So I kind of call myself 25% Irani, 75% Parsi. And so this tradition of doing a Nowruz table is very much an Irani tradition that the Parsis have lost. So in India, when I did the Nowruz table, that was something my in-laws never did because they were 100% Parsi and they had never done it. But it was something my mom had taught me, and I really wanted to do it because I wanted to do it for my kids. I wanted them to be able to kind of have this festival, which meant something. So I started this tradition, and then I've done it for every year since I got married. But yeah, so I think it's really important to include your kids, and that's how they learn a lot about the culture. I try to really do it, especially now since I'm in New Zealand, because I get really scared that we're going to lose that heritage and what it means to be Parsi if they're not, surrounded by those people. So it's even more important. Like this year, they helped me do the chalk, which Sujata talks about in her book. So that's like a Rangoli pattern that Parsis do. But again, we have a little bit of a British hack to it. So, yeah.
I think we have time for one last question before we do the drawing. And I see Cheryl has had her hand up for a while. Cheryl, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. Perzen, it's wonderful hearing your culture and your food, and it sounds delicious, and I'm anxious to look at your blog and give it a try. So what I'm curious about, so my husband is from Mumbai, and he didn't grow up cooking, but when he came to the US, he took a lot of cooking classes and made some friends with other men that were into cooking. And so today, almost 30 years later, he is a fabulous cook, and he is the main cook in our household. So I don't cook.
Good on you.
When he does go to India, he's not allowed in the kitchen, even though his mom has heard that from him that he's really good and he does all these different dishes. He's not allowed in the kitchen. She's the predominant cook, and same with going to other family members' houses. So I'm wondering, in your culture, in an extended family, or maybe in current day, do Parsi men, are they allowed to cook and enter the kitchen?
So yes, in my home as well, the Parsi men never really entered the kitchen. I don't think it's not a Parsi thing, it's an Indian thing. And it's an Indian mum thing, which I think my generation and perhaps my mum's generation are trying to, I guess, correct, where we just felt like, oh, they don't know anything, so just get out, get out of it, and let me kind of do a better job and do it quickly. But if we kind of go back again, that was also a woman's territory because a lot of women didn't earn money. So, it was very much a kind of like, this is my territory in the house. And so my in-laws were really, really progressive. In fact, I actually lived with my in-laws before I got married, and then I just moved back to my mom's house 1 month before, and then I moved back when I got married. So they were really, really progressive. But I think what happens in an Indian household is because you live together, it's always the domain of the senior woman in the house. And it's a place for women to come together, talk where they were safe, where men wouldn't hear them. So it was very much a kind of community experience. And so that is why I think the men are not really allowed. I actually noticed this. So I have been like you, since we moved to New Zealand in 2019, been slowly training my husband. We've not got to the cooking chapter yet, but he does make me a good cup of tea. And we're on to rice now. So maybe 30 years later, I'll be in your position as well. But, what I found is when his parents came to stay over with us, his mom wouldn't let him do stuff. And so because she wouldn't let him do, he wouldn't do. So it's more of a woman thing where we need to let them, it's like with kids, right? You let them make a mistake. I wouldn't shout at my kids if they added in salt instead of sugar in the food because they're kids. And so I think you need to see them from that very beginner lens and just kind of involve them. And yeah. So
Thank you.
it's sad that we have to do that, but that's just trying to rewrite history, I guess. Yeah.
Perzen, you're a wonderful mom, a wonderful writer, and an extraordinary cook. And I thank you so much for all that you're sharing with us. I want to announce that we do have the winners from a random number generator. There was nothing fixed here. The winners of this one is for Lori Edelson, and this one is for Chrissy. So I want to, I see Chrissy's face. So, and I see Lori's iPad. It says Lori's iPad. So Stephen has your emails. So what I'm going to do is email both of you directly to see how you want your book inscribed. And just so everybody knows, if you want a personally inscribed book when it comes out on June 1st, you can order it from a bookshop called theivybookshop.com in Baltimore. It's my neighborhood bookstore. So I have the ability to go in there and actually sign your name. It's not coming from a warehouse. And they do mail things within the United States. So that's another option if you didn't win today and you'd like to have one another time. Is there anything you want to add, Perzen, about how people can find you that is not in the chat or?
No, I think I've put in all the links there. So I would highly recommend the podcast. I did want to share for the American audience, there is a friend of mine, Nilofer Mavalwala. She's based in Toronto, I believe, but she's got a great Parsi cookbook that's come out, which is very much catered to the US audience with US ingredients in it. So that's definitely worth checking out. And in the lockdown, I know she started doing Parsi cooking classes on Zoom. They're lots of fun. I've been to one of them. And so, yeah, if you're looking for something to pass the time, you can go Google her and check her out. I don't know if, I think she has a website, so she'll put all the details of the Zoom classes on there. Yeah, so I definitely recommend her. And yeah, so I guess the next thing I'm doing now is like we were talking, circling back, Sujata, to what you were saying around Parsi restaurants, at least here in New Zealand, we're a ways away. Like, you know, when we talk about Indian food, the only thing people know is butter chicken and tikka masala. So I'm on a journey to take people beyond butter chicken. And so I've started Dolly Mama, which is a range of ready to cook Indian curry paste. And one of the first products in there. So Dolly is my maternal grandmom. She was the one who, I want to finish off this conversation with a story about her, because I used to go to her house every Saturday and she'd always make me this curry. You know, she had a curry leaf tree outside her bungalow in Borivali. And she also, there was a guy who would come down and like pull off a fresh coconut from the coconut tree. And so then she'd make me a curry with fresh coconut and curry leaves and fish in it. And a lot of Indian grandmoms will ask you this when you're small. They'll be like, oh, what do you want to inherit? Like, which jewelry set do you want? And which saris do you want from me, etc. And so I was a very hungry little child. And so when she had asked me that question, apparently the family story is that I told her, I don't want any of that. All I want is like this never ending pot of your curry. So please just leave me like a big bowl of your curry. And then we moved to New Zealand and she passed away, and I was really distraught that I'd lost that. So you'll find her curry recipe on my blog as well. It's called Mamaji's curry. So Mamaji is the way you say maternal grandma in Gujarati. I'll put that in. And that was one of my top visited blog posts after Dansak. And it's been my honor, because when someone makes that recipe, I've had comments from people and people writing and telling me that it's reminded them of their grandmom and their mamaji. So it's a beautiful, it just like really touched me when someone replied back saying that brought back memories of the way their mom made curry or their grandmom made curry, because I think that's how we can keep our food alive. So when I came to New Zealand, I really wanted to do that and popularize these dishes, you know, like let's not talk about butter chicken and tikka masala and dal and saag paneer and blah, blah. Like that's just like one community, one tiny North Indian Punjabi community, while there's so much Indian food around. So her coastal curry, that was one of the first curry pastes we did in the business. And so now everyone gets to try her curry, and it's super easy. People can just bung in the paste, add water, mix it in, add fish, and they get to have my Dolly Mama's curry. So that's my way of keeping her alive for me. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for getting up to spend time with us. And thank you to everyone from around the United States and Europe who came today. And you can always send me an email at my website, sujatamassey.com, and be sure to visit the Bhavi Bride to get those recipes. And the podcast is wonderful too. The Kiwi
Foodcast.
And there are a number of the shows are specifically focused on Indians in New Zealand who are cooking, or I found them. So, or there's all different, but I love those. And so if you want to continue your imaginary journey that may result in cooking, those are fun too. So, and thank you, Stephen, for all you did. I really appreciate it. It's a lot easier to have you here. So with that, I think I will end the meeting. Farida pointed out that in the March 2021 Food and Wine magazine, there are some Parsi recipes. So that's good. Oh, there it is. Okay. I subscribe to that magazine. So I'm gonna, it just hasn't come to my house yet. So. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday, whatever your holiday is going to be this spring. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.